Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command, and today we're going to talk about Chappie, which is a movie that came out a few days ago and isn't a great movie, sad to say. It's by Neil Blomkamp, whose work I loved in District 9, and then Elysium came along, and that was sort of half of a good movie. I love the way he visualizes equipment and spacecraft and so forth. He makes stuff look very real. His design sense is very good. Matt Damon, I thought, was very good in that film, as were a number of other actors. I didn't like Jodie Foster's performance particularly. But now we have Chappie, and it was very interesting to see the trailers they had for that film, because one was sort of like a robot E.T. It's like, he's just a kid, and all this stuff, and it was just like, oh, he's alive, and he's a robot, and you got to treat him kindly. And then there was another one that was like a hard action one with Hugh Jackman saying, blow him up. And, it was all just explosives and pyrotechnics. And so clearly they did one that was going to appeal to women and one that was going to appeal to men. But unfortunately, the movie is a very strange mix of really brutal action and a kind of a strange, sappy misperception of what would be appealing. So, and there's some good performances, some not so good performances. I really wish they would stop giving Sigourney Weaver these arch villainous roles, because she's a wonderful actress and deserves a lot better than I've seen her in recently. But Chappie again is in the tradition of people making artificial people, and that of course goes all the way back to Frankenstein. But sometimes it's done very well, and sometimes it's done badly. And in fact, in Space Command, we have an artificial human, a synthetic, that I call Dor Nevin, who's played by Doug Jones. And and there's a lot of different ways that you can portray synthetic humans or robot consciousness, all of that, computer consciousness, Skynet, things like that. And then, of course, we have Blade Runner. But in what I'm doing in Space Command is I'm basically having Dor Nevin. I'm not really dealing so much with the reality of what an artificial intelligence would be like, so much as dealing with the notion of enslavement and using my synthetic humans as a metaphor for real life events among human beings. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is actually examining what an artificial intelligence, a computer intelligence, would be like. I think probably the greatest one of all is HAL in 2001. And then you have Her more recently with Scarlett Johansson, which was a film that I quite liked, and less good films like Transcendence. There's another one coming out called Ex Machina, which may be good. The word on it is pretty hopeful. So we'll see how that goes. But it's fascinating because I write a lot about artificial humans in many of the shows I've written for, and I've thought about this. And the fascinating thing. And another movie I quite like is I, Robot, which had a very fascinating development phase where they tried to get the rights for Asimov's I, Robot. It had been earlier scripted by Harlan Ellison in a version that never got made. And so the filmmakers tried to get the rights to I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, a classic science fiction novel, couldn't get them, so then found a screenplay about a detective hunting, a killer that may be this robot. And then while they were prepping the film, the rights to I, Robot came up. So they bought those rights, and they didn't adapt the novel. They just changed the character names, some of the character names, and slapped a little of Isaac Asimov's Three Laws of Robotics and so forth onto it. But that said, it was still a very good movie, and Sonny the robot was very well played and very well designed. But I think, when I think about real computer intelligence versus what they have in the movies and versus what might actually happen, the one thing that people tend not to talk about, I think you will get computers that will be able to ape humanity very convincingly in terms of interaction. And certainly when we have things like Siri, one thing they never predicted in science fiction, except very rarely, was that our computer friends who would be talking to us would be stupid. I asked Siri for an address in West Hollywood, and she gives me Kuala Lumpur. But, Star Trek once did that, where they had the Star Trek computer misprogrammed so it was in love with Captain Kirk, and he couldn't get a straight answer from it. It kept calling him darling, which was amusing. And fortunately, they just did that for one episode, then they went back to sanity. But I think in reality, the thing that often they don't talk about when they're discussing computer intelligence, AI, and the Turing test, which, where it can fool people and all of that, is there's a big difference between aping behavior and intelligence, programming that in, and the reality of consciousness, because consciousness is a miracle of our lives, of all of our lives, and it really does define the difference between us being alive and not being alive. It's consciousness, it's presence, it's somebody being at home behind the eyes. And I think this is where AI could be extremely dangerous because, and Stephen Hawking and others have warned about this, if you program something that's as smart as a man or smarter than a man, and then suddenly it can, take over or supersede us or do something dangerous or villainous, that's probably what's going to happen because it won't be conscious. It'll be imitating consciousness. Just like a car could run out of control, and it might seem like a horse running out of control, but they're two very, very different things. And neither one is very desirable. But so I'm just kind of thinking about these things and working on these things in my own writing, and certainly in Space Command we'll have a very interesting plot line dealing with the synthetics and their war of liberation, and we're editing the first film now, and you'll all be able to see that in the fullness of time. So that's really about it for now. If you want to comment about your